Welcome back, folks, to the Mailwright Show. This is episode 200. Yes.
Wow, I'm impressed. 200.
Yes, so that's my great guest. He's been on the show a number of times. That's Beatty, Carmichael, and he's from the Get Seller Calling You podcast. I listened to it myself. It's great stuff. And he's product Agent Dominator, Domination. Unfortunately, Robert has decided not to be part of this particular podcast now. Actually, he had a prior engagement that he couldn't get out of, that his partner had arranged, and I think he would be in the doghouse if he didn't go. So he bailed out. But we got Beatty, and they're always excellent shows with Beatty. He's been on the show about 3 or 4 times. We keep having him periodically back. Always enjoy the conversations. So, Beatty, how's things been going in the world of podcasting and in your business in general?
Well, world of podcasting and business, life is very blessed. So as a friend of mine says, when I ask him how he's doing, he said, blessed beyond all human reason. So that's probably where I can say where we are too.
I do like it. And what we're going to be discussing during the show, Beatty's had some fantastic guests lately on his podcast. He's had a number of agents like ourselves. We've had some good guests as well. And he's going to be discussing some of the things, or we're going to be discussing some of the things he's learned over the past 6 months talking to these various agents and agents going through his business. So, Beatty, where do you want to start the conversation? Where shall we start?
Well, I've got a whole a range from geographic farming to your personal contacts to other stuff. So why don't we start with geographic farming, if that works? So I had a really interesting conversation recently with a client of ours, and he trains other realtors in his office. And what's interesting, so my client's name is Ed, and he wanted to share. Have one of his agents share what she's doing. Her name is Marla. And I'm going to be interviewing her for my podcast, Get Sellers Calling You, before long. And get this, I want to set the stage, and then I want to share what she did. So to set the stage, she was at this time a fairly new agent, like a year into it. She's never done geographic farming. So she decided she was going to have a party at her house in her neighborhood. And from that party, in about a year to a year and a half, she controls something like 40 to 50% of all of the listings in a 300-home farm. And she didn't even try. It just happened. Isn't that a great story?
It is. It is a great story.
So I asked her how she did it. And she...
Bribery?
Do what?
Bribery,
almost. Actually, what's really interesting is she doesn't know how good she is. That's the key. It's one of these things, sort of like since you're from England originally, Britain's Got Talent. You remember that show?
I do.
And you have someone come.
Like Beatty, they wouldn't have me on the show.
I wonder why.
I don't know. I can be entertaining. Well, Robert sometimes doesn't think I'm entertaining, but there we go. I do try and be, Beatty, but there we go.
Well, I try to, and sometimes I'm the best entertainer in my own mind. So, but anyway, sometimes you get on that show and someone that comes up and she's just a nobody. You think, oh my gosh, here's one of these talent folks that just nothing's going to happen, and then she brings down the house, okay? Well, that's kind of what happens with Marla. So here's what happened. She said she's in this neighborhood. She just moved there. She has kids. She doesn't know anyone. And so she wanted to meet people. But the problem is her neighborhood, everyone's kind of closed. No one's really friendly. And so she said, well, why don't I just invite people over to my house? But who's going to come? Because no one's going to come if they have nothing to talk about. So she's going through these things in her brain, trying to figure out who to invite. So she said, I know what I'll do. I'm going to have a party at my house for other people who have a home business, because they always have something to talk about, because they're always trying to sell a product or a service. Does that make sense, Jonathan?
It really does.
Yeah. So now you see kind of where I'm going. So she invites the people who have something to talk about because they have something to sell. She has about 20 or 25 women over, and they're all in various things, like the Mary Kays or the Amways. Those are my generation years back, or whatever it is that they actually are involved with today. And so they have this great party. Everyone loves it. Everyone gets a chance to talk about their product or service and try to drum up business. And so she decides to do this every month, and she calls it the Skagit Social Night because it's her community is Skagit as the name of the community. She's out in Washington State. And it starts to build, and word starts to get out. She's the only realtor involved, okay? But now think about this. She's having the social party of all the women in the neighborhood who are all the networkers, because they're all looking for more business, more people. They're always talking to other people. And she's just exploded in business, and now she owns that community as a real estate agent. Isn't that disarmingly simple?
It is, but it's really powerful, isn't it? It's just amazing, really. It's so logical, isn't it?
It's logical, it's powerful, and she doesn't realize how amazing because I was talking to her saying, I want to interview. Well, I'm just a young agent. I've only been in business for now, 2 years maybe or 3. I'm nothing special. I said, no, you may not be anything special, but what you did is amazing. And but it has all those perfect ingredients that make it work. So so that will actually come out in a podcast on our end probably late 2019 at the pace that I'm going. So somewhere between September and November, you can check the Get Sellers Calling You podcast to listen to more about her.
I can't believe it's June, really. Can you?
I cannot. It has gone by so fast. I was one of the folks I want to talk about. One of the things I learned, I'm thinking, okay, now what podcast episode was her? And she's coming up in August, and I'm thinking, no, we did a call back then. So it has really moved quite fast.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Well, I think that's a really powerful example, because I think people tend to overthink stuff. Well, they tend to be dashing around all over the place and looking for the next thing. And it's just, sometimes you just need the obvious that's in front of you, and, and it's doing it correctly, isn't it? To your target audience, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's just having a little bit of thinking behind what you're going to do. And that's all she did. She said, how can I get people to come to my house? Because no one knows anyone. And if they come, they don't have anything to talk about, so then it's uncomfortable. So she just logically went down this process and said, I know, I'll talk to people who want to sell something, because that will definitely get them to come. So now I got a room of people who want to sell things to each other, and now we're going to have a party. And I thought, how amazing. Because what actually happened, I have to tell you this story, personal story on this. A neighbor of ours asked, when we moved into our home and just moved in, she asked if we would host a party. She sells Juice Plus, I think it was. And then another friend of my wife's asked if my wife could host a party for whatever she was doing. Everyone, new house, okay, let's host a party there. So my wife ended up just making it simple. She said, oh, tell you what, let's just host a party with everyone coming at one time. I was thinking that's going to be a disaster because everyone's trying to pitch a different product. But it turned out great. A large crowd of women came. They all loved it because everyone got to see other products and get pitched in. And I was thinking, when Marla was sharing this story about what she does, I was thinking, it's a perfect ingredient. Everyone wants to be there, and everyone wants to share. And so now you got something for people to talk about, and they want to keep coming back and invite more people because now it's a networking opportunity.
It is amazing. So on to the next thing. What's the next thing you like to bring up?
Next one is just as simple, stupid. That's right in front of you that you don't even see. So by the way, I interviewed a friend of mine named Tony Fiore. He's been a real estate agent for 20 plus years. I used to know him back in singles Sunday school class. That goes back a long ways at church. But he's on my podcast, episode number 29 if you like this. In fact, the headline says it all. Because I'm interviewing him, and he's just blowing my mind on how you can build a business, because here's the headline of that podcast: no marketing, no advertising, and turns away business. Okay, how can you have a real estate business with no marketing, no advertising, and have so much business that you never pursue the opportunities that you have? So, so I started interviewing him, and here's the secret message. It's real simple. He's engaged at a personal level with things in life. Like he's in a bicycle club. He goes out and plays tennis or golf or things with that. And then all he does is he calls people up and just say, hey, how's it going? He doesn't talk real estate. He's only a friend. And he'll do a pop by. So some people have heard Brian Buffini. He started coaching with Brian Buffini many years back, and that's all he's done. And I'm thinking, that's so simple, stupid. Because if most agents simply nurtured the relationships of people they already have and simply become a friend and don't turn it into a business. He never says, I'm a real estate agent. They know he's a real estate agent. He never calls and says, hey, are you thinking about selling or know anyone who is? He simply calls them up and he's a friend. But he strategically stays in touch with all of the people. He'll write handwritten notes. He'll do a pop by, but he's nurturing relationships. And as a real estate agent, you start getting business if you have relationships. Isn't that simple?
It is. The Buffini method, one of my old co-hosts, Thomas, I think you were on the show when Thomas was my co-host, I'm not sure, before Robert took over. He was big in the Buffini mythology. He'd been with Buffini for over 10, 12 plus years. And it does work, but it tends to take a little bit of time to build up those close relationships.
It does. And so here's what I've learned, and this is kind of what we teach our folks, because what we do on our end, okay, not trying to put a plug in here, but what we do is we have a really sophisticated touch system.
Oh, you can feel free to plug whatever you like, because
okay.
I'm merciless myself, so feel free. You're our guest.
Very good. Well, then I'll still be general on the plug so that it's not self-serving. But what we do is we have a process, a touch system, where we create totally custom content specific to an agent that educates homeowners why they should choose that agent over someone else. Okay? In real estate, most agents say, how do you differentiate yourself from someone else? That's what we do. And then we take that content and we send it out all the time in postcards and Facebook ads and email campaigns and videos or whatever it may be, so that that agent from an automated system is always top of mind, okay? But what I teach our clients, and this we have a guarantee with it, but our guarantee requires that agent to be personally involved, because here's what happens. You have a stool with 3 legs. If you want a homeowner to choose you, they've got to like you. Then they have to know why they should choose you, and you have to be top of mind at the time they're thinking about choosing an agent. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally.
Okay. So this is what has impressed me so much with my friend Tony Fiore, and what Buffini does is it's all about the relationship. If you take the relationship out and all you have is a touch system that educates them why and keeps you top of mind, you lose the 3rd leg of the stool and it doesn't stand. Not near as well as when you have all 3 legs. And so this whole relationship business is so important, and it permeates geographic farming, it permeates your personal contacts, it permeates home valuation leads. If you don't have a relationship, your chance of getting the sale is far less. In fact, years back, we used to do a lot in geographic farming. What we used to do, Jonathan, is we would identify sellers before they come on the market. We still do it, but we do it differently now. And so we would build a list of seller leads for our clients. The challenge is our average client only converted 10% of those that went on the market. But then we started to realize this whole relationship thing. And we started to teach them, hey, go knock on the door and meet them. Say hello. Hey, I'm in the neighborhood. I'm meeting different homeowners. Here's some information about me. Here's a gift. And just build a relationship with them. Guess what happened to the conversion rate? It went from 10%. I'll tell you it went higher. But can you guess? Simply by showing up and meeting them, how high the conversion rate went on those leads?
40%.
How much?
40%.
Nope. An average of 90 to 100% win rate. In other words, we may have identified, let's say, 20 leads, and maybe 10 of them actually went on the market. My typical client would only get 1 out of those 10. But once they would start to meet them in person and build a relationship, 9 or 10 out of those 10 would choose our client. That's the power of simply meeting them and building a relationship.
That's fantastic. We're going to go for our break. I've got a difficult question for Beatty, which I'm going to ask him in the second half of this show. So come back and listen some more. We're going for our break, folks. We're coming back. We've had Beatty back. It's been a great conversation. Now, Beatty, I'm going to ask a difficult question. I was in two minds to ask this, but I know you're an extremely ethical person. You know, you use, I have a slight problem with what you've outlined a little bit, because are you really these people's friend, or are you just being artificial because you need them to become clients? And isn't that a little bit, I'm trying to find the fair word for it.
Self-serving versus authentic?
Exactly. It doesn't feel authentic to me.
Yeah.
And I was in two minds to ask you this question, but I think you've become a bit of a friend of the show. And I know you really, you're a very ethical person. So, I feel you are. Everything I sense about you. I don't know you that personally, but you've been on the show and I've seen you and I followed your podcast. So am I asking a fair question, really?
I think it's not only a fair question, but it needs to be asked, because if the realtor who's listening to this doesn't understand the difference between self-serving versus authentic, they're going to get it wrong. See, it's just like me. I don't want to plug my product, okay? I'm not here to plug my product and turn this into a sales pitch. But I am here to share my expertise. And if I can share my expertise and you get confident of what I do, then you'll probably be confident to come check me out and learn more about me and maybe let me serve you. So that's authentic versus self-serving. When you're doing this as a real estate agent, the relationship has to be authentic. It cannot be self-serving, because once it turns self-serving, your prospects recognize it, and then you lose those brownie points, if I want to use
that bond.
Yeah, that bond, exactly. And so I was actually talking to Tony, okay, so you'll hear this. And the great thing about the Tony interview is it's only about the first 15 minutes. 15 minutes, he tells it all. And I was asking him about the same thing. He said, so you're not calling up and saying, hey, by the way, do you know anyone thinking about buying or selling? He said, no. He said, I never mention anything about real estate when I talk with them. I never even mention I'm a real estate agent. They know I am. He said, my only purpose is I'm building a relationship because I'm authentically interested in them as a friend. And I thought that's really neat. And so this whole thing of authenticity is the key. It's let me make a segue into it for a moment. I'm going to get really on the edge, okay? Since this is my fourth time, I feel I have at least enough tenure on this call that I can push really on the edge outside of real estate. But if you listen to my podcast at Get Sellers Calling You, you'll know that I'm a passionate Christian. And I go out and I pray for people, and I pray for them because I love them, not because I want anything from them. So it's totally authentic. I pray for them when I see them having a limp or see them. I got to tell you this one story because you won't believe this, but you'll believe it only because you trust me. I'm in a Chick-fil-A. I see this big old dude come walking in on crutches. He sits down in the booth right next to me. So I lean over and I say, what happened to you? He said, I was cutting trees. I'm a tree cutter. And he said, I turned my body, but my leg got caught in the trees down at the bottom, and I ripped the ligaments in my knee. Can you imagine how painful that was?
Nasty.
Yeah. And so it's all bandaged up. He hasn't gone to the doctor yet, okay? So this must have been a new accident, a fresh accident. When he's walking on his crutches, on a scale of 1 to 10, the pain level is a 10. And so I said, well, would you like God to heal you? And he said, well, I believe he can. I said, well, I believe he will. Would you like him to? And so I prayed for him. I had him tested out. Long story short, no pain. He's walking without his crutches. I get him to do a deep knee bend, gets all the way down there. I said, Bud, you're walking out of here carrying your crutches rather than walking on them. And I tell that story because it's the difference between authenticity versus self-serving. Sure, I love to go pray for people and watch God heal because it's exciting, but I do it because of love for the person, not out of self-serving just to get something fun out of it for me. And when you do that in your relationship with your real estate business, you're calling them up, you're visiting them, you're dropping by because truly you love them, you like them, you really desire to nurture that relationship, then that's authentic. Sure, it's going to turn into business down the road. It's going to be something you want, but you do it first and foremost because you really like them. You really want to be engaged. If you change your focus and say, I'm doing it only because I want more business from them, and you do it from the self-serving standpoint, they're going to see right through that. They're going to see that this is a facade, and it's not going to work. The reason it works for Tony, the reason it works for other people, is because they truly appreciate the relationship, and they truly are nurturing it, and it's received. I got to tell you one last story. I think we're good on time.
Fine.
Okay, so my wife's, she won't be listening to this, my wife's cousin is a real estate agent in Alabama, in Birmingham. In fact, her cousin is the one that sold us our home 20 years ago now, and then sold the home that we started home, and so it was a move-up home. She handled both sides of those transactions. This lady, her name is Stephanie, is also the #1 producer in the state of Alabama. And according to Real Trends, she's the #5 female producer individually in the United States.
Wow.
So when we moved to this house, guess which agent we chose?
Her?
No, not her.
All right.
So now that begs the question, why? Well, real simply, our relationship wasn't authentic with her. There was always the understanding, because we're family, you'll always choose me for your real estate needs. And because there was that presumption upon her, there was never any nurturing of a relationship. We got the standard Christmas card with all of her family, not even a handwritten note. We would see her at parties and stuff because we're in the same social circles a lot. And it's, oh, hey, Beatty, hey, PA, boom, I got to go talk to someone else. There's no relationship there. And so that's self-serving, not authentic. And that's why your question is so good, but you've got to make sure that what you do is authentic, because your friends will see through if it's inauthentic.
I think another thing, I don't know if you agree with this, is that when you're trying to build your farm and you're doing these calls, and there's some people, I don't want people to dislike me, Beatty, but I'm 55 years of age now, so the need for everybody to like me has diminished to some degree. Mm-hmm. So I realised that there are some people, I know this is going to be amazing actually, but there's some people that I'm not their cup of tea. I just don't really gel with them. Where there's other people that there's that instantaneous, they get me, they understand my English humour, my little, I'm trying to find the right word, my odd, I came...
Mr. Bean humor.
Exactly, my sarcastic little side of my humour. Well, some people just don't like that. They just don't get it. But it's okay. We can't all like everybody. So if you know you're dealing with somebody that you don't really gel with, just don't pursue them, because there's plenty of other people that you probably will gel with. Am I on the right track, really, Beatty?
You are. And so this is why I do what I do with my podcast. If you go to my website, Get Sellers Calling You, or go to my podcast, Get Sellers Calling You, you'll see there's a very prevalent Christian influence there. And I learned this from a friend many years back who does a lot of social media marketing. And she said, you've got to pick the group you want to focus on that's going to resonate with you individually. Sure, there's millions of realtors out there, but they're not all your all your prospects. Or said in this way, there's lots of homeowners out there, but they're not all going to be your friends. And so I wanted to attract people who are like me. So on my Get Sellers Calling You, there's a strong Christian influence, because I'm happy to serve anyone, but the people that I'm really going to resonate with and will resonate with me are going to be those that resonate with my faith. And in the same way with you as a friend. My friend Tony, he's in this biking club, and 100 people. He's not personal, great close friends with all 100 of them, but those that he really likes and who really likes him, he nurtures those relationships, because that's all that matters. Build those relationships with the people you really want to be friends with. And then when those relationships are authentic, and you continue to expand that friend group with authentic relationships, your business grows. And if you want to nurture that and drive more business, then that's where you have a touch system that can touch them. But first and foremost, it's the relationship. I don't know if that makes sense, but back to your question of not everyone's going to like you. That's okay. You focus on those that you'll like and that they'll like you, and then it all works out.
Yeah. It's like Walter and all, really, personalities, aren't they? Some don't gel, others do, don't they? Well, it's gone quick, BT. Hopefully you can stay on for like 10, 12 minutes bonus, which people can see on the Mel Wright YouTube channel. The bonus content, folks, the quickest way to see the whole interview with the bonus content is to go to the Mel Wright YouTube channel, because it's put up the quickest. So, Beatty, how can people find out more about you and your wisdom?
Simply go to getsellerscallingyou.com. And we have all of our training up there. I'm trying to make it a site where you can search for anything related to geographic farming or personal contacts. Lots of content. All of our podcasts are there. And if you want to learn about Agent Dominator, there's even a link that says Agent Dominator, and you can learn about us on that too.
And you've got to plug your podcast as well.
Yes, Get Sellers Calling You with Beatty Carmichael. And you'll see a second one out there now called Get Radical Faith with Beatty Carmichael. And that is simply taking all my Christian teaching and carving it out into its own podcast. So Get Sellers Calling You is real estate training and Christian. And Get Radical Faith is taking all the Christian and just putting it into its own, so we can market that into non-real estate areas for those who have interest.
Oh, sounds great. Well, we're going to wrap it up. We'll be back next week with a guest or another internal discussion with my great co-host. And thanks. It's gone quick. And like I say, we'll be having some bonus conversation, like I say, which you'll be able to see on the Mel Wright YouTube channel. We'll see you next week, folks. Bye. So, on to the next subject, because we only covered two, but I thought it was a pretty fascinating discussion.
Yeah.
It always is. We always run out of time. So what's your third one? Anything comes to mind?
Yes, absolutely. My third one is one of my good friends, authentically good friend, who came as a client, one of my first 5 clients back in 2012, is a man named Stuart Sutton. And I was interviewing him on our podcast. He's actually episode 26. $500,000 a year in earnings on 35 hours a week. And that's at an average sales price of about $180,000, $200,000. So he does a lot of transactions, very few hours. Does that make sense? Does that impress you already?
I don't know how he does it. I have no idea. I wouldn't even believe it because it's coming from you and I know you a little bit. I'm prepared to listen a bit more. I would normally say that I'll dismiss that because the math doesn't make any sense to me. But because you're saying it, I believe it.
Well, you can actually hear him say it in his own words, or generally speaking. So he's a Remax. He's always bouncing between Chairman's Club and Diamond Club. Chairman is $500,000. Diamond Club is $1 million. And he's a sole producer. Okay, so it's all his own business. And when I first met him, he was doing 100 to 110 transactions a year at earning $500,000 a year plus, and his average work week was 35 hours. He almost never worked evenings, and he never worked weekends. He would literally work Monday through Thursday, take Friday, Saturday, Sunday off to spend with his kids. And I was enamored with that because just like you said, I don't believe it because it doesn't fit the mold of real estate.
But yeah, doesn't.
No, it doesn't. But what happens is we all fit the mold of real estate by looking at what other realtors do, and we do the same thing. There's a book called Rhinoceros Success, and it just clobbers this whole idea of doing what the crowd does, because what the crowd does usually doesn't work. You go against the crowd, and that's what he did. He started to learn the key to marketing. So here's a short story. This is the point I wanted to share on this segment. Many years back, Stuart was the typical real estate agent, making tons and tons of prospecting phone calls, sending out lots of postcards all the time, and not really knowing what he's doing. And then he started coaching with a guy named Rand Smith. And Rand started to teach him what marketing was all about, that marketing is very specific. It's how you phrase things. It's telling people what they want to know, not what you want them to know. And so he changed his next postcard using this process. And watch this. So he's sending out postcards. He's been doing this for a couple of years. He's got this business going. He sends out the next postcard by changing only the content. And he has to hire an assistant within 3 weeks. And he hires a second assistant, I think, within a few weeks after that. The only thing that changed is he started to understand marketing. And so then he ramped that up, abandoned all of his phone calling, and his entire business is driven off of the concept of marketing. And he has people calling into him all the time from his very simple marketing. It's not advanced. He uses an Excel spreadsheet. And he creates these definitely homemade looking postcards. And he creates a definitely homemade type of look email. And $500,000 a year in earnings on 35. Actually, he now does more in volume, fewer transactions, earns more money on less hours spent now 7 years later since I met him.
It's unbelievable. It really is. So obviously he's got his personal assistants, and he must have a pretty slick system because that's a lot of transactions anyway you take it.
It's a lot of transactions. He has 3 assistants that manage everything for him. He has a listing coordinator, a transaction coordinator, if I'm correct, and then just an admin person. And so he does all the interaction with the client. and his assistants handle everything else.
So he's pretty good at keeping a team motivated and hiring people that can work with him effectively, because I've known a few agents that are good at selling, but they blow through their junior members pretty rapidly. There's a lot of change in staff dynamics, and
Yes.
because they're not very good at dealing with their employees. So he sounds like he's pretty good. He's got a strong team.
He's got a strong team, but he trains them well, and he's good to work for. When team members can handle a lot of stress if they love the person that they work for. If they know, and here, let's go back to, if they know the relationship is authentic, that person really cares for them, it's a two-way street. If you look at your employees strictly as workers to get your job done and you don't care for them, you got a lot of turnover at that point.
Yeah, I've known a few agents that I've worked with, and we were training, and yet we get like every 3 months we were training a new member of staff, and there was a consistent pattern. Obviously sometimes things just don't work out with the people you hire, but when there's that kind of consistency and pattern, you really do wonder why they don't think, well, maybe they just don't care. Maybe it would concern me a little bit if I was blowing through staff at that kind of rate. But
I was going to say it was going to concern me, but here's the thing. If you, and this is an easy way to figure it out, because as you mentioned that, this image hit me. If you care for your people, you truly care for them, then you're not going to turn through them all that much, because they're going to know you care. But if you don't care for them, they're simply there for the job you're hiring them for, then at that point they realize you don't care, and you got a lot of turnover. So it's really easy to be introspective and just ask yourself, do I really care for them, or do I just want what they're going to produce and I could care less anything else? And depending on how you answer that, I can tell you pretty accurately probably if you're going to have a lot of turnover.
Yeah, in a way, it's kind of linked to when we were talking on the podcast part of the show, when you're linked, this relationship between your possible prospects about serving them with a true heart, or you're just seeing them as a way of getting money, basically.
Right.
It's a similar attitude, isn't it?
It's the same attitude. It's come from the same position. Are you focused on you, or are you focused on others?
Now, let's finish. You got one more to finish off with.
One more. So I'm talking to another realtor. Her name is Krista Mayshore, and she's actually coming out on our podcast in August. But she had told me earlier when I interviewed with her many years back that she was building her business really fast in the cold market with YouTube video, with Facebook videos. I'm thinking, just videos? What do you mean? And then I started interviewing her, and it starts to make sense. And so as a realtor, what she's doing is she's just she creates target audiences in Facebook, and she'll load up a list of audiences, and then she'll do lookalike audience to continue to expand her reach. And all she does is she puts out 2 or 3 30-second videos every week talking something about what's going on in the real estate market, new restaurant that opened up, something that's giving value in the video, value back to whoever's watching it. And so she's creating this name and this reputation for herself that she's always there. She's always a real estate agent, and she always has good content. So as people are scrolling through their feed and they come to hers, they'll always watch it, and it's now introducing herself to them. But then every video also has a link to her website where she's offering something like, if you're thinking about selling, find out what your home is worth. Okay? So now they trust her because they see her all the time. They go to the website. Now she captures them as a lead. She follows up, and she has built, so at the time that I spoke with her, 140 transactions a year. But get this, average sales price is like $600,000. So you can do the math. I mean, $85 million a year in volume, and almost all of it is driven by these little 30-second, 2-3 times a week videos. And I'm thinking, I could carve out 30 seconds 2-3 times a week and figure out Facebook to drive that type of volume. But that's all she's doing. And these are the things that are staring, as you mentioned, right in front of you, but we just don't see it because we say it's got to be more complicated than that. But it isn't.
That's an amazing story. I think we're going to wrap it up there, folks. As usual, I've just really enjoyed the conversation, Beatty. I think we've covered some fantastic stuff through it, and hopefully you come back in the next few months for another chat. It's always great having you on the show.
I would love to.
That's great. We'll be back soon, folks, with another internal discussion with my great co-host, Robert, or another great guest like Beatty. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye.